Well, folks, the time has come for us to talk about Starfield's first DLC, Shattered Space. I'm going to try to keep this short, but no promises because I have a lot of thoughts. So with that in mind, let's get started. I want to start by saying that if you're easily offended, then this may not be a video you want to watch, because I'm going to say some things that you don't want to hear. Now, when I first downloaded the DLC, I was not sure what to expect, but I was really just hoping that the story would be good because the main story for the base game was so bad that I thought it could not be worse than that. I also purposely did not go and get the Rev 8 because I wanted to avoid being tempted to use it to speed through the update. I had already prepared myself for the DLC by avoiding any spoilers about it and only looking at what had been officially released from Bethesda. When I first loaded in, I thought I would just get a quest out of the blue and have to follow it. When I realized that this was not how it was going to start, I thought I would just travel to another location. Before I left New Atlantis, I even tried to get into the Varun embassy thinking that maybe that would start the quest. I am ashamed to say that after flailing around for over 15 minutes, I broke down and resorted to using Google to find out how to start the DLC. Little did I know that this was just going to be the start of my frustrations. So I finally jumped into a star system that had no quest waiting for me, and that was when this new space station appeared. Finally, I was going to get into the new story. I do have to admit that the first part of the DLC with this new station was fun. It did get a little old toward the end, but at least it started out on the right foot. I don't plan to go over every detail of the story because if I did that, then this video would be several hours long, and I really don't want to do that. I may talk about it more if I decide to make any lore videos for Starfield. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about the pros and cons of this DLC. Starting with the pros, there were several new locations to explore. The art design was very good. There were some new weapons, armor, and outfits, and the premise of the story was okay. We also got some new crewmates. Now, as for the cons, this list is quite a bit more extensive because, good lord, this DLC needs a lot of help. First and foremost, there is no choice in the story. The entire DLC is very much linear and very restrictive. Let me explain this. First, once you get past the station, you end up having to land on a planet where you are met by the Varun leadership. There is a scene with the ghostly figure of Anasko Varun, which apparently only we could hear, which of course makes us the chosen one. At this point, we only have one option to be able to continue the quest, and that is to join House Varun by going through some ritual that was really kind of lame. I mean, Bethesda has spit out better rituals in the past, so I'm not sure what happened with this one. Once I got to this point in the story, I just started choosing all the rudest dialogue options possible, even though all the rude options were still not really rude. Once again, I felt like I did with the main quest. I was annoyed that I was being forced down one path. The worst part of this is that I ended up playing again on a second character, and the dialogue choices didn't matter because, in the end, all of the outcomes are the same with the exception of the responses we hear. Even at the end of the story, if you insult them, they act like they want you to leave, but there is no consequence if you don't, or even if you leave and come back. It really is the most absurd thing. Speaking of dialogue, there was so much of it that at various points in the story I was just taken out of the world because there was just too much word salad. What do I mean? I mean that much of what is said is pointless. Much of the dialogue does not add to the story in any way. It got so bad that if I didn't move while they were talking, my camera would start to rotate around my character. Even the camera got bored. Bethesda really took advantage of one cool mechanic that the base game got a lot of praise for, that being the zero-gravity environments. They then decided to take that praise and shit all over it. I liked the zero-G environments because they were kind of special, but in Shattered Space, they were way overused. So much so that they went from being a fun mechanic to an annoyance. Let's talk about the new weapons. While some of the weapon effects were cool visually, none of them were any better than the weapons that are available in the base game. On top of that, there were no unique weapons, armor, or outfits that you get as rewards. Since we're on the topic of rewards, I was shocked that the only rewards you got from just about every quest, besides XP, was credits. At this point in my playthrough, credits are the last thing I needed. This entire DLC was loaded with credits though. Everywhere I turned, there were credits. This includes just lying around in each area. While exploring, I ran into plenty of enemies. The problem is that while this single square on the planet had plenty of new handcrafted locations, the creatures, however, are just reskinned versions of the same creatures you find on almost every planet in the universe. Even the so-called terrors are the same such creatures, with one new ability added. They have been given the ability to teleport. Yes, this mechanic does add a bit more tactical awareness to the game, and it will keep you on your toes at times. Sadly, over time, it ends up just feeling like a gimmick because it gets way overused. Not only do the terrors use it, but the phantoms we run into also use this teleporting feature. Moreover, these creatures have been turned into bullet sponges. Thankfully, all of my characters have plenty of ammo. All in all, it took me about 10 hours to complete both the main story and the side quests. The problem is that of those 10 hours, nearly half of it was from just the endless dialogue. I got to a point pretty early on where I just gave up trying to get all the dialogue options because none of it mattered. Once again, Bethesda wrote a story that holds your hand through every choice, and I use that word loosely, all while forcing you to take a very specific path. This entire DLC felt like it was just supposed to have been part of the base game at launch, but they needed more time to finish it before release, so they cut it and decided to use it as DLC. I was very disappointed that Andrasia really doesn't have anything more to share or even has any insight that any of the other companions don't have. Each companion has something to say as we go through the quests, but it isn't any more than you get from them doing quests in the base game. If any of our companions should have played a bigger role in the quests, it should have been Andrasia, yet she did not. She barely even reacted when we landed in the Varun capital. Given how her quest line ended, I expected her to have a much bigger role to play, but no. She had the same usefulness as every other companion did, and what makes that crazy is Andrasia is Varun. It was a fantastic failure to capitalize on an opportunity by Bethesda, but then so was this entire game. I just don't understand how it is even possible to fail this hard. Well, maybe that's not true. I do know how. But it should not have happened given the feedback they had from the community. Yes, I realize there are some people who are fans of this game, and good for them. I, however, have standards, and this game does not even meet half of them. I looked into the player count and how it changed from before and after Shattered Space released, and the results were shocking. There was a sharp rise in concurrent players at release, but that rise did not reach the same levels as when the base game released. However, that sharp rise fell off very quickly. In fact, the player count has been on a steady decline. On Steam alone, the player count is down to about 5,000 concurrent players, and while the data for Xbox players is not available, I doubt it is any higher. So what does this mean? Well, it means the vast majority of players who were interested in Starfield have since rejected the game. But Kane, how can you say this? How do you know? Well, let's put it into simple terms. An overwhelming majority of players who had access to Shattered Space because they bought the premium edition of the base game were so turned off by the base game that they never even downloaded Shattered Space. Again, this is based off of Steam numbers, but it is a very good indication of the state of the game. Of the players that did download and play Shattered Space, the majority of them negatively reviewed the DLC. Just 29% of those reviews were positive. This is a very telling story. Like I said, the design was fantastic visually. The writing, however, is much more the issue here. You see, the voice acting is fine. The delivery of the lines are fine. But the quality of the writing is horrible. This directly affects how the story plays out. Let me explain a little. When you are stuck in these incredibly long dialogue sequences, the dialogue between characters is incredibly unnatural and feels very forced. At the same time, it's also very basic. In previous Bethesda titles, I actually kind of looked forward to these dialogue sequences because the dialogue was interesting and engaging, and it fit very well within the world's setting. Shattered Space, and Starfield overall for that matter, suffers from a lack of cohesive dialogue that doesn't feel forced. For example, during Sarah's personal quest, there is a point when we meet her old commanding officer, and the dialogue is interesting, but out of nowhere, Sarah would just fly off the handle for no reason. This is just one of many examples throughout the entire game, but I think you get the point. With Shattered Space, this issue was amplified heavily. At multiple points in the story, the dialogue ended up not making any sense, and it really took me out of the experience. It took me out so much that I just stopped caring about which choice I wanted to make. There were multiple points in the story that I found myself asking, why am I playing this? I could be having so much more fun playing any other game. The answer to that is that I was really hoping it would get better, but it didn't. To make matters worse, the story ended almost abruptly. Getting back to the dialogue, it just isn't immersive. It feels more like it's vehicular in nature. I never found myself engrossed in the conversations, never found myself wanting to learn more. The dialogue is designed to give you just what you need to get to the next objective, and that's it. It almost feels like tutorial writing, if I'm being honest. The dialogue is not there to add to the story or the world. It's there to confirm that you know what you are supposed to be doing. There were several points where I thought I was being talked down to or made to feel less than I am. This was very confusing since the game and the story is about you being the chosen one, a god among mere mortals, if you will. Yet at no point does anyone even react to your powers, with the exception of your companions, and even that is a minimal reaction. All of these criticisms worry me about future games from Bethesda. The reason for that worry is because of just how bad this game turned out to be. Yes, it still has a small but loyal fan base, but it pales in comparison to any of the previous games that Bethesda has put out. It also pales when compared to other games outside of Bethesda that also fit into the same genre. We know that the next game is going to be The Elder Scrolls 6, and I fear that if that game releases and carries the same issues that Starfield has, that could be the end of Bethesda. Will The Elder Scrolls 6 sell a ton of games? Yes. But if the player reviews come in and it is overwhelmingly negative, that could force Microsoft to take action before the next mainline Fallout title goes into full production. If that happens, then Bethesda will most certainly be in danger, and I really don't want that to happen. This studio has put out some of my favorite games. Seeing this studio fall from grace is heartbreaking. So, how does Bethesda right the ship? First, they have to get back to basics. They need to get back to what brought them to the dance. The immersive world building, environmental storytelling, and combine that with an interesting story that adds to the world. Second, stay away from current political and social issues. Most players play games to escape from the real world and don't want elements from the real world brought in and or forced into the games we play. It doesn't add to the experience at all. Last, but certainly not least, write a compelling story that includes real choice and consequence. Stop trying to let everyone do everything in a single playthrough. This will not only add to the replayability of the game, but it will also make people care more about the story because they have to think about what they want to say and do. As much as it pains me to say this, that is why players like New Vegas so much. That game is full of choice and consequence. And the facts speak for themselves. The people want more of that and less of Emil's position that players just want to forever live in a single playthrough. Yes, some of us like building things, but we all like good stories, and there's no reason to think that one or the other must be sacrificed. Just because someone is going to spend 12 hours building shacks doesn't mean they won't appreciate the great novel too. Both can coexist at the same time. I really hope that Bethesda fixes these issues before they release The Elder Scrolls 6, but I have little faith that that will happen under their current staff. I guess only time will tell. Have you played Shattered Space? What did you think of it? Did I miss anything in my review? Sound off in the comments below. While you're at it, like, subscribe, and share. And as always, I'm just glad you stopped by, and I'll see you in the next one.